So the biggest thing is getting that product market fit and really testing it and really making sure that you have it before scaling up on the marketing. But I've had a lot of people, they'll ask the marketing for Endy, how do we do the same thing? But if you don't have product market fit, the marketing doesn't do anything. It doesn't matter what you're doing.
Hey everybody, my name is Adam Levinter. I'm an entrepreneur and founder CEO of Scriberbase. I'm also a published author and podcaster, and I'm very happy to be here hosting an episode of Learn with Shopify, where we release a new video each week that will help you start, run, and grow a successful online business. For simple, actionable tips to grow your online business, make sure to subscribe. Today, I'm thrilled to be joined by Mike Geddes, who founded Endy in 2015, Canada's fastest growing vertical e-commerce company and market leader in the online mattress space. After the big sale to Sleep Country Canada in 2018, Mike has gone on to launch another startup called Kiln, quality cookware at affordable prices, which he built right on Shopify. Mike, welcome to Learn with Shopify. Let's get started. Let's start with finding product market fit. So when you and Raj have this idea to dive into the mattress space, and I know you have some interesting views on testing or micro testing using digital channels, how are you guys finding product market fit in the mattress space?
Oh, it's a great question. I think I see a lot of entrepreneurs, like in general, one of the biggest issues is product and getting stuck on product. So the biggest thing is getting that product market fit and really testing it and really making sure that you have it before scaling up on the marketing. But I've had a lot of people, they'll ask the marketing for Endy, how do we do the same thing? But if you don't have product market fit, the marketing doesn't do anything. It doesn't matter what you're doing. So part of it is really going back to those basics and really doing that work to make sure that you get there with it. Part of the problem is a bit of like a cart and horse and chicken and egg problem, is that you want to have some revenue early on and you don't want to burn too much cash. So I think the issue is how can you do that as rapidly as possible? And I guess that's where there's the Lean Startup book and a few of those that have really talked about this concept. So the way we approached it, just from a practical perspective, was to kind of take marketing out of the way. So originally we started with Google Offers, and there was Groupon, and there was Living Social. And so they actually just sent out email marketing for us on our behalf. The D2C revolution was just sort of in its infancy down in the US, and in Canada really was non-existent. And so it gave us a chance to test out a bunch of products. So pillows, memory foam pillows was a big one that did well. And I think what we realized is with all the marketing that Tempur-Pedic had already done on what memory foam was, that we had something there that we could just market, well, here's a memory foam pillow. And there was marketing baked into even just the product name. So as we tried it, we saw that people quite liked them. They liked them better than their regular pillows. There was a good product market fit. I mean, we even tried teeth whitening. And actually there is a Smile Club Direct company that's gone public and made a lot of money doing this too. We could have gone that avenue. I think our hearts were a little bit more on the sleep side than it was on the personal beauty side. But yeah, it was fun, and we experimented with all these different products. When we started doing our own marketing, we already knew we had the fit. Nowadays, I'm not using necessarily channels to do the testing, just using actually Facebook marketing itself. And you can do conversion-driven campaigns where you say, find me a bunch of conversions, do up a video. Part of the problem is it's hard to do completely. Like, you can't just say, oh, let's just throw up a bunch of ghost brands and test a bunch of products and see what happens, because customers don't trust that. So I'm saying, like, with Kiln, what we're doing right now is we're kind of doing it a little bit at the same time. We're doing some of the marketing, but we're testing all these different products. I mean, we know people need knives and they need plates and they need pans. So it's just a matter of which one is the best and looking at which trends are there and testing the different products.
When did you and Raj start thinking about brand? And were you going through this, these mission, vision, values type exercises? Like, everybody points to Endy as being a beautiful Canadian brand story. You guys don't necessarily come from a branding background. So how did you get this right?
Yeah, I would say the branding background can be a little bit of a trap for entrepreneurs. And I see this a lot with people in the marketing sphere that we brought in and worked with over the years, and agencies. This concept of brand becomes really this huge thing around, we need to think about the brand. And I would hear people say that so many times in meetings around marketing. And I think finally what I sat down is like, what does brand mean? and kept asking more questions. Like, what does it mean to you when you say brand? Like, what are you trying to say? And what I realized is that everyone's definition was like, it was coming from here. They're like, brand meant something that was bigger than them. And it was, but how do we measure this? Coming from, I come from an engineering background. So like, how do we measure brand? But then the marketers are like, you can't measure brand. Yeah. Brand is beyond
it's
measurement.
It's a Mr. Miyagi thing.
It's
right?
a mystery. Yeah. And I guess that's where I just kept asking more questions. I was like, how can something be beyond measuring and all the rest of it? So I would say what eventually we did is early on, we kind of had this concept where we're building brand and we're driving sales at the same time, which old marketing just says that this is ridiculous. There's no way you can do that. And we just said, well, through Facebook, it attributes the marketing. And then there's a lot of people where they may not buy, but they learn about the brand. And then doing some of our offline ads, our goal was just to maintain a certain standard in terms of performance. But we knew that there was a splash of people who were getting impressions. But the first time was actually after the sale, which was interesting learning because since it wasn't our money anymore, we were just sort of like, let's focus on awareness, right? We had a year and so we were sort of like, yeah, let's do this. And I heard a similar story from another acquisition where they did the same thing. And it was amazing that really what it is to me, what it's come down to is like people talk about sort of like this really short type salesy marketing as especially the brand people think it's bad, and then you've got the sales type marketing people who think the branding is just a waste of money. But really it's just about maybe like mixing a whiskey where you have some that's sort of short term, you're trying to get someone tomorrow to buy, but the branding piece for me is just about the time period that you're willing to invest over a period of time, and you can measure in terms of awareness of through surveys and say, do you recognize, like when you think of Endy, what do you think of, and if they say mattress, you're like, great. I think brands work the same way where the most important is the word of mouth at the end of the day. And that's really where your trust is going to be built, which still comes back to the product market fit, where people, if they like your product, they're going to tell friends that they like it. And then you add in the customer experience piece around how they worked in terms of receiving the product and all the other things around shipping and around dealing with the company. And so I think that's where the trust starts to build, but it's a long game. It's not, it's not a short game. So like, it's something that you just have to have as your philosophy from day one. Eventually, I think maybe where my learning is with Kiln is I'm starting to already be like, let's think about brand, but it's about how can we in a 2-3 year timeline, make investments today that pay back in 2-3 years, mixed in with some of the direct sort of Facebook marketing as well, which we're trying to get sales next week. But I think if you don't have the long view, you can fall off a cliff where you're just iOS 14.5 hits. And then if everything's based on getting sales next week, and then you have a bug or a change on the iOS side, and then all of a sudden sales start dropping. But if you had built a more robust strategy around looking not just into short term, but also long term, you're not going to see the same pick because you're having people that have heard about you 2 years ago that are looking to buy now.
What types of market dynamics were you watching? So at the time that you guys launched Endy, this is going back to 2015. Casper's born in 2014. They have early success down in the US. Were you watching what they were doing south of the border?
The first one that we saw, it was, and definitely saw that, I think if anything, them and their success was just like, we're on the right track with this. I think again, it's like, we're looking at some of these different products and you're like, okay, this memory, like the mattress is where we got to go. And we were sourcing and looking at different things in around that time. So we tried mattresses. Actually, the funny thing was with this is that where the testing isn't always perfect is we tried mattresses going through some of these channels. And because they were so big and bulky and expensive, a lot of customers weren't necessarily, there wasn't the branding, like we couldn't control the return process and all those other things. So it worked better when we did it ourselves. So that's why, like, I guess the testing is more about getting some gut checks and things in there too. And then saying like, well, once we add the proper 100-night trial and we had better customer service and can do the marketing properly around the unboxing experience, like that would seem to be a big part too, where when you were doing, let's say, an email or something, you couldn't necessarily communicate that vision. So I think that's where we saw, and Tuft & Needle was one that came before Casper too, that they were on Amazon originally. They did all their testing via Amazon. So I've seen people do this too, where they build Amazon stores and then they basically, as a science experiment, control for the marketing and then do just source a bunch of products, and then they find the ones that do the best and then they move those into a D2C realm. And definitely I've seen people who have been having a proper method in terms of moving it from Amazon over to the D2C realm. And Tuft & Needle was a good example of that one. And they were, I think, the first one that I recall seeing.
You were getting comments from the gallery that were saying that, of course, Endy made such a big splash because you got the marketing right.
Yeah.
You guys had perfect marketing, but you always say product wins over marketing.
Yeah, well, I think part of it is with the reviews nowadays as well. Like our knife sets, for example, we send out to influencers and all these different people. If people don't like your product, it's like you're pretty stuck, and it doesn't matter how good you are with the marketing. So I know, like Casper as an example, they went through definitely quite a few versions of their mattress before they settled into the proper one, and it can just slow you down. Part of it too is even after the after sale and all the referrals that you build in, you want your customers to be talking about your product and how great it is and wanting to share it. And if you don't have that, it slows down. So all your marketing spend you're putting in kind of hits a wall, where if someone just says, well, this product isn't that great, you'll get a bunch of first-time buyers, but you're not getting people who are referring you and being second-time buyers and building that lifetime value. So that part's important as well. And so that involves, taking customer feedback. It's not like the journey of finding that product market fit doesn't just end at the point when you start doing the marketing. It's a continual process. But I think if you can separate it a little bit, that definitely helps. And then as you improve your product and work on the marketing side, it starts to work together quite nicely.
So reflecting back on your journey from 0 to 100 million in revenue, so the early stages of Endy, you mentioned Facebook as a primary acquisition channel. Were you getting all your traffic on Facebook at that time, or were you diversifying across different channels?
Google was the first big spend we put into digital marketing. A lot of that was based on just seeing the dynamics of Google was sort of where things were even in the first part of the 2010s. It seemed to be where people were marketing. Facebook kind of just got going, but when we first tested it, we weren't getting a lot of conversions on it. People weren't used to buying things off Facebook at that point. It was still, where it started with universities and then connecting with friends, and then the news feed came, and all that happened pretty fast. If you think back on it, like it was like 1 year. Now it's like we've had it stable for quite a while and we're used to it. But now, like, the idea of products wasn't quite there. So it took a little while for people to even think of purchasing. And originally it was just, static ads people were posting. And then now, this move to video and some of that stuff. So I think what really changed with them is they came up with this lookalike audience concept, where find people that are like the people that already purchased, and that seemed to be a game changer for them, where all of a sudden you had this magical audience that was like people that wanted your product. And at our point too, with D2C, it was still a fairly new idea in Canada specifically, so we were getting a lot of the lead users, like the sort of bell curve of lead users to middle users to leg users, and trying to, there's a whole book on crossing the chasm where they talk about this whole idea of going from the lead to the main part of the bell curve, which is the challenge. And so we were in the lead and we were getting a lot of that with lookalikes, but then how do you get to the main part of the curve? And then that's sort of in your scale up phase, where you're like, okay, we've got a bunch of people that are buying this, but we also want to get, I guess the person we would talk about was like, but what about, Karen from Saskatchewan? Do you think she's going to buy, an Endy mattress online? Like, they're not into buying things online or into the next coolest thing. They just need a mattress for their house or for their kids or what have you. So that was sort of the next challenge of moving there. And actually we found most of that came from using traditional media as well, and looking at the media mix and not just sticking with the digital stuff, because a lot of them were consuming differently, or radio and TV and billboards and all those other things were important. So I think it comes down to timing. Like if you fly out with a giant TV campaign before you have product market fit, it's not really going to do much for you. There was this magical time around 2014, 2015 where you could just like put money in the Facebook machine and then revenue would come out, and you're just like, this is amazing. Yeah. And I don't think that magic time, I feel like it's starting to sunset a little bit. I don't think it's as easy as it was in that particular time 100%. Period.
What about these other up and coming channels, TikTok, Snapchat, Pinterest? Were you guys testing any of these channels at Endy, or have you been experimenting with them with Kiln?
We did. Yeah, we did try all the channels. Pinterest seems to be a one where I hear a lot where people get some traction with it. I haven't quite got perfect traction with Pinterest. We've tried a few different ads and tried some different things. And I think with home, it's more at least from what people have told me, more of a top funnel approach, because you're getting people that are searching for, say, home decor, or they're searching for, but they're not going to be like, I want to buy a mattress tomorrow on Pinterest. There's no like low funnel search there. People are more in an ideation way of thinking. So they're more thinking like, I want to look at home decor. And then if your sort of mattress shows up, or if they're talking about kitchen tools, and then our knife set happens to have an ad, I think there is a spot for having Pinterest there in the funnel, because apparently the traffic is quite valuable. I think for us, part of it is just, when we have what was working really quite well with Facebook marketing on the Andy side, and actually with Kiln, we find Instagram's working really well, that you just sort of keep working on that channel, building content for it and that sort of thing. So in my experience, I've found those two, the Facebook and Google, were sort of where we continued to focus. Long story short, I think all of them are worth testing, and I think it's like something where you go back to and you say, let's test it again. But I haven't been able to fully scale any of those other channels.
I remember riding the subway, back in 2016, 2017, and for every Endy ad, there was about 8 Casper ads.
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, this is interesting, and I wondered if Endy by default would be experiencing a residual benefit of having a US competitor like Casper come in and plow all this money into marketing here in Canada. Did you guys feel like that was an advantage?
They did, yeah. And I have to give Raj some credit. He definitely reached out to them a couple times and was just like, hey, our sales are doing really well. And then they would put more marketing in, and we were like, this is great. I think part of it is looking at it from the perspective, there's, in terms of awareness, Yep. There's category awareness, and even broadly, I mean, the awareness that a mattress exists is sort of ubiquitous. Everyone knows about a mattress and what it does. But then it's about, well, can you buy a mattress online? And then that's sort of then you're starting to narrow in. And then it's about which brand are you going to buy? But that's this whole middle category. If someone else is paying all the money to educate everyone about buying mattresses online, that's great. So we definitely were just like, all right, keep going. And so for us, it was just about then, finding that better little zone of product market fit, which we kept working on. That was in a better spot than they were at. And at first it was sort of like, they felt like a bit of a juggernaut, and then that were bigger than us. But I think as we just kept, with a better product, and we just kept marketing that same about being made in Canada, and it's a better product, and we had better reviews, and like I still sleep on the Endy. It's better than the mattress, than the Casper mattress, in my opinion. So you just keep going, and then eventually it just starts, that wedge turns into a crack, and then you start to really get some traction with it. And then pretty soon we were doing more top funnel marketing in Canada and all of the rest of it, and we're just kind of sailing along, and not really too concerned of what they were doing. I'm not really sure where their sales are at now, but we were definitely quite far ahead.
Yeah. What were some of the other big brand differentiators that Endy had?
Well, it's funny. Yeah, a lot of people in that traditional marketing space, like early on, were just sort of like, well, there's not enough differentiators with your product and this and that. Okay. And we were sort of like, yeah, but it's a mattress. Okay. People just want a good mattress. And then the fact it was made in Canada helped us. It wasn't really like, I would say, a big part of it is we just wanted to make a good experience for Canadians, and we thought having a factory nearby would be better. And it came really just from more of a product perspective, but as a marketing piece, it became super important as well. And I think more and more, at first we didn't know if people would perceive made in Canada as necessarily positive, because not that many things were made over in Canada, other than we knew Canada Goose was owning the whole idea of like being made in Canada, and Canada's cold and they provide warmth, and we're like, okay, that makes sense. But yes, people across the world can get that. But maybe a made in Canada mattress wouldn't work elsewhere, but it certainly did well in Canada specifically, and people liked it. I think what it was is even some of these brands talk about sustainability and some of these other things, but for us it was all baked into that, like local sourcing and all of that other stuff. We didn't have to ship a bunch of stuff overseas, and everything was made here, and people like the idea that it supports the economy. So that adds a whole uniqueness towards it.
How did you and Raj start thinking about sourcing and manufacturing early on at Endy? And for those that are watching that have no experience with sourcing or manufacturing product overseas, what lessons, tips, tricks could you share?
The sourcing, part of the problem with sourcing is like a lot of the factories, at least I know from the mattress industry and from kitchen so far, they're just like old school. They're more handshake, and they're older people who've been in the industry a while. They have a lot of experience manufacturing. But I think when you come in like a whirling dervish and you're like, hey, I want to make, online, and I'm going to build this and I'm going to build that. And they're just kind of like, what are you talking about? Another thing too is not getting so much on this email, like emailing them and all the time, like just like pick up the phone, see how they're doing, ask them how their wife is doing or their husband or their partner, and see what they're up to. And I think I find that has a better approach than just being like, are you interested in working with me on this project? I'm looking at, like for us, we're working on a new pan right now, a cast iron pan. And, talking to the all the people that pour metal in Canada, like they're not internet entrepreneurs, right? Like they pour metal in their shop. Yeah. So when you're telling them your vision of what you're trying to do, they're kind of like, I don't fully get this, but I know this online thing's a thing, and like I'm interested in this. But I think you do want to build a bit of a partnership. I think it sort of depends in terms of your sourcing strategy. I think early on that partnership is super important because you don't really have that much volume. I think later on when you're fairly big as a brand, you're looking at more corporate level things like what's our costs and what's our lead times, and you're pushing on this. But I think if you try to get a little too greedy on that early on, that you can potentially hurt a good partnership with someone because they're going to make a product for you, and that's critical to be able to get forward.
Did you have a vetting process, or was there a scorecard that you used to figure out which was the right partner?
Early on, it was more about relationships. It was just about who can I get along with well, and do they have the capabilities at least to make what I need? And then I think especially at lower scale, you can spend a lot more time on each unit. Yep. As time goes on, you're looking for people with manufacturing mindsets. When we scaled up, your thousands in a month or thousands in a week, you just need someone who can crank them out at a good quality standard and has that under control, which is a different skill set than when you're doing your first 100. And they're trying to come up with new ideas and help you out with the product design process and things. So I found the relationship piece was important there for sure. But I think quality control you can manage yourself inside the company. And so we had a strong team there, led in operations that did a lot of that quality control and looked at all the different pieces. And a lot of that too is just follow up and checking in on things and saying, why are we making this decision and that decision, and making sure that there's consistency and things like that.
You've talked about the importance of co-founders and that you really value having a partner in the mix. Why was Raj the right co-founder for you, and why were you the right co-founder for Raj? And what were the unique abilities that you guys both brought to the company?
Yeah, I think it's just complementary skill sets worked really well. A big thing is if you're going to work with someone, having diversity within the team in terms of skill sets is super important in as many ways as possible. And a lot of it is that, if you're building if you're first you're starting with co-founders, but then after you're looking at bringing people in to help that like employees and things. So the problem is if you hire and you're working with, all your co-founders have the same skill and everyone you're bringing in has a similar mindset, it's very easy to just have a giant blind spot on certain issues. So it's nice to have people with different perspectives. And then, the important part with the co-foundership is that they're gonna challenge everything in terms of what you're looking at, because especially early on, you don't have necessarily a giant data set to say, oh, we've sold 100,000 mattresses, so we know all these different things that the customers want. You're still just working through it via dialogue with your co-founder. And so having that person with a different perspective can help challenge any ideas, like hypotheses that you have where this is going to work and that's going to work, and they can really help you nail that down. Especially if talking about product sourcing and working with suppliers, there's a sort of operational mindset, and then having, someone who has at least thinking in terms of social proof and some of these other things. They're not necessarily the same brain that thinks this way. Like, hey, let's do a campaign where we get Jose Batista and then we bring him in, and then we have a mattress shoot, and then there's a PR thing that comes in, and then we're going to do a campaign on the subway. That's a marketing mindset. So it's good to have a mix of both of those, because I think if that marketing mindset goes into the factory, it can be, the whole thing can fall apart. And if someone's too organized with the marketing, where it needs to be a neat pile of everything needs to be perfect and attributed, it doesn't always work that way. Sometimes it's just about, let's make a big splash.
That you've talked about the importance of relationship building with your customers in a direct-to-consumer context, the importance of responding to reviews, giving the customers the right experience, servicing them the right way. What are some of the key lessons on the customer service side? And do you carry some of those over into Kiln? And do you share that same advice with other founders based on your own experience here?
Yeah, for sure. A big thing is just customer service, even the name. Really implies it's more of an operational function. And it's just like even going through calling one of the big phone companies, it's like, if you want to leave, they're like, oh, we're going to pass you to a different team. And then they have like a different team for each piece of it. Like if you're a new customer, they have a prospecting customer service team. And if you're looking for a promotional offer, they have a separate team. But then the problem is you get transferred around to all the different teams depending on how you're feeling that week. But none of it for the customer is beneficial. But for them, operationally, it's efficient. Yes. And they're using the least amount of money possible to generate the most amount of return from those experiences that I had. That you learn that maybe there's another way that's just more customer centric and not so focused on saving money. And the other piece is that you can look at it also as with customer experience, you can look at it also as a bit of a sales channel as well. Like not necessarily like the upsize your fries kind of perspective, but more in just like building that relationship, having customers be happy. People's recency drives their feeling about an event. So if they had something terrible that happened right before they opened the box, that's going to affect you a lot worse than if something bad happened on the website before they ordered it, but then they unboxed it and it was fantastic. So trying to, bake in the unboxing experience has become a big thing for a lot of the D2C companies for that reason. So yeah, I think with the customer experience side, a lot of times it was just sort of like, if someone's upset, just give them something. Like who cares? I don't care. Right.
That's going to be in big, bold
yeah, exactly. Any people are going to call me and be like, everybody's calling in.
Somebody's upset. Yeah. Just give them something.
Yeah.
That's on the wall.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Well, it's just, there's no point on trying to fight people over some of this stuff. It's just to be more relaxed with it and be more personable. Yeah. As opposed to putting them through a, A, B, C, D, E sort of journey that's baked into some operational plan that drives EBITDA. Yes. People don't like it. They feel it, Yes.
Talk to me about your experience selling to Sleep Country. So huge accomplishment, $89 million acquisition. It's fantastic. How did conversations with Sleep Country start? And do you believe now, looking back, that was the right acquirer for you?
Yeah, I do. We talked to a few different groups. What I love about it is it did keep everything in Canada, which is what our mission was from the start, was better sleep for Canadians. So it was able to, our mission statement was able to really, stay together. You were talking about mission, vision, values at one point. We went through that process for sure, where we went through trying to figure that out, because you do need a bit of a North Star for what you're doing. And especially as the team gets bigger, not everyone understands where that was from day one and what your thinking is. So it's important to have that sort of posted on the wall for people so they get where that's at. But yeah, with Sleep Country, that's what it was for me, that it made sense, that it was just like, we're after the same group and we're out to do the same thing. And they have a big charity program. And
you've talked to me in the past about the importance of getting feedback, sometimes from your employees, as being the most important sources of feedback. So are you doing that now with Kiln, with your team of 10? What sorts of feedback have you been getting? And can you share some of the more interesting pieces of feedback that folks have shared with Mike about Mike?
Yeah, I would say like the biggest thing was early on, I think, is like when you start off as a founder in a company and you build your team, it's really a journey going from this founder person that starts a company and with a small team to like managing a larger team. And I think there's a journey that a lot of people go through on that, especially if you're a younger founder. It's not like you've managed teams of hundreds of people in your past, so you're still learning as you go. And so I think at first you kind of think, well, I came up with these great ideas, and you can develop a bit of an ego thinking you've got things figured out. But then you need help from people. Like, you can't be good at everything. There's nobody who's good at everything. And so it's like, I guess we had to go back to the pro stars. You had Bo Jackson, who could play baseball and football, like there's a few people who I can give it to them that they can do both. But I was like, for me, you just have a limitation to what you can do. And so that's where your co-founding team helps early on too. And then as you bring in the broader team, but the feedback piece is super important. And especially as you go through that journey, you're not going to necessarily have a leadership coach that's going to be sitting beside you being like, hey, you're a little offside here. But even just in terms of your leadership style, like if you can at least just like get more feedback from people, people on everything, I think it's beneficial. I think where some people, maybe they get scared is they think if they take too much feedback that then they're going to be forced to go that direction or whatnot. But there's a big difference between having an empathetic conversation with someone about how they feel about something and saying like, I totally hear what you're saying. We have to go this way, but what you're saying makes total sense. And I think then the person actually feels heard and probably is more bought into your decision, as opposed to, we're going this way, sorry, I don't have time to deal with this, right? And so I think that's the tendency, from what I've seen from some founders, where you get into this sort of myopic direction of like, we just need to build this huge mattress company and it's got to go this way, but it doesn't. You never want to get frustrated if they think something's bad about your product, because you want to just like fix it. And if enough people, you get 15 to 20 people that say this part of the product I don't like, then you should change it, and make it better for them. And that's going to help you sell more. And the reviews are some of the best taglines you can come up with. The customers are the best marketers.
Okay, Mike, look, it's been a pleasure chatting with you today. Thank you so much for being here. It's always good.
Yeah.
Talking Endy, talking Kiln, wishing you the best of luck.
Thank you.
If you guys thought this video was helpful, make sure that you give it a thumbs up. That helps us grow the channel and grow the community. For more simple, actionable tips to grow your online business, make sure to subscribe to Learn with Shopify so you don't miss out on future releases. I'm Adam Levinter, and thanks for watching.